Day 1093 of the Ukrainian War Map, also known as the Russo-Ukrainian War. Juzzie here, and today is another update as I take a simplified and down-to-earth approach to some of the most important happenings on the ground in Ukraine. So starting off, we'll take a look at those Russian losses, as currently Russia sits on more than 863,000 military personnel losses, representing an additional 1,190 losses in the past day. Then as for hardware, 14 tanks, 14 APVs, 63 artillery, and a walloping 6 air defense systems, which included some makeshift designs. Then headed to some news with a turbulent 24 hours, because just when we start to see Russia using donkeys for army logistics, not to mention their squads on motorbikes or crutches, we also see US President Donald Trump taking a hardline approach to getting a peace settlement sorted post-haste. Because after recent global bilateral and multilateral meetings, with all of the sentiments exchanged, Ukrainian President Zelensky suggested concerns of Donald Trump living in a disinformation space, and one that was created by Russia. From that, and most notably, of course, Trump following up, referring to Zelensky as a dictator without elections, which sounds familiar. Where have we heard that before? Ah yes, straight from the Kremlin. But not just any Kremlin talking point, but arguably designed by Putin for Putin to delay peace negotiations. And now with the US administration advocating for Ukraine to hold elections, then I guess it's time we do a bit of a deep dive on this matter. Now, the Ukrainian constitution actually prohibits elections during wartime under martial law, with of course Ukraine already enacting martial law, obviously due to the full-scale Russian invasion. And these laws are in place to quite literally protect Ukrainian democracy from foreign interference, and more to the point, to do so to protect from the very country invading them right next door. But since this is the direction things might be headed in, this then means Ukraine would actually have to amend their constitution to hold elections, which makes it all very ironic because on the one side we could see Ukraine actually making these constitutional amendments for a new leader potentially, which starkly contrasts with Russia, for example, where Putin made his own constitutional amendments to stay in power forever essentially. These are two very different nations. But back to the Ukrainian side, let's say there is a new election due to dictatorship concerns. Someone like Valery Zelensky, the former commander-in-chief of the armed forces of Ukraine, looks to be a front-runner and is marginally more popular than Zelensky in recent polling. Everybody just loves Zelensky, who, by the way, has absolutely zero pro-Russian stances. But even if all of this happened, elections for the same or new leader as the outcome, Russia would, on the massive balance of probabilities, still call the election outcome as illegitimate because he didn't get the pro-Russian candidate he wanted. Then everyone would be back to where they started. Delayed peace negotiations, just as Putin would want, because he needs to have and win this war. There is no option for second place in Putin's mind for all of this, which is all very much exemplified by the continued desperate tactics his forces deploy in the field. Now also back to the Ukrainian side, far from a dictatorship because martial law in Ukraine is not indefinite. It gets revisited and extended every 90 days as necessary. Also noting that Zelensky's party doesn't even have a parliament house majority to ensure an extension of martial law every 90 days. As it's the opposition party members in the Ukrainian parliament that need to vote this in. And they have done so, consistently supporting martial law extensions during Russia's invasion of Ukraine, including even former president and opposition leader Petro Poroshenko, who has supported martial law consistently. So these Russian narratives lack any value or basis to them because they ignore these legal and practical realities. Then as for further Trump post mentions, there is this soundbite going around the internet of how Zelensky said that about half of US military aid to Ukraine is missing. But that's the only soundbite you hear much of in this crazy information space. But if you were to listen to the recent full interview, Zelensky didn't actually claim that half of the American aid sent to Ukraine went missing or vanished into thin air. Instead, he actually went on to state that about half of the promised funds had not been received from the US, which is a crucial distinction. Further to that, he actually refers to funds that were allocated for war-related activities but did not go directly to Ukraine. Much of this money was spent in the US on military production, training, intelligence, and supporting US forces in Europe. So I can only imagine that arms manufacturers in the States are not at all fond of this portrayal of missing funds, thereby feeling like they'll miss out on future investment or funding. Because most of the military aid to Ukraine was in the form of equipment, for which the USA had then reinvested these military aid dollars into their local industry to build new next-gen defense equipment, be it to replace Humvees, tanks, HIMARS, other missiles, and so on, which is especially useful in the case of a rising China in the Asia-Pacific. So it resembles much more of a win-win in these situations. Nonetheless, these concepts of Zelensky personally receiving these large bags of cash from the States is completely unsubstantiated and generally not worth feeding energy into, unless it's to put on further display proof of Russia's systematic lying. But there's already plenty of that going around. But in the end, out of all of this, with a push for Ukrainian elections, it is what it is. But on the other hand to all of this, with Trump's post, very few might argue that these fiery comments from Trump is one great big Trump psyop to get European nations to spend more on defense. In President Trump's first term, where he sat down with the then NATO Gensec Jens Stoltenberg at a Brussels 2018 meeting, as Trump was hammering Stoltenberg about pushing up NATO countries spending to 2% of GDP, or at least for the ones that hadn't. Then, 2 presidential terms later, Trump is back in, making some very fiery comments as a means to forcibly jack up European military spending commitments to both Ukraine and NATO. Now, take all of this with a grain of salt if you will, there's only a small chance of it. But on the flip side, Trump has been very vocal about Europe on this matter. But more on these latest updates as we take at least a brief look at the map now. And starting out in Russia, because overnight, a significant fire has erupted at the Lebedev Institute of Precision Mechanics and Computer Engineering in Moscow, engulfing 1,500 square meters. The blaze has caused the roof and walls to collapse, with authorities warning of potential explosions on site. This institute is no ordinary research facility. It develops high-performance computing systems crucial for Russia's national security, including geoinformation and navigation systems. It was also sanctioned by the EU and even Switzerland due to the Ukrainian invasion, and the institute's role in the defense sector is well documented. While the fire's origin remains a mystery, it's a blow to an establishment that has played a part in Russia's military ambitions. Then also, somewhere on the map, well, specifically, both Kursk and everywhere else on the map, because a seemingly tired or exhausted Putin has all the latest on map updates, because in this video he stated that just an hour ago, Russia's heavily embattled 810th Brigade had apparently crossed the border into Ukraine. Now, it is true that Russia has been hammering this zone. However, Ukrainian authorities, specifically Andriy Kovalenko, head of the Center for Counter and Disinformation, refuted Putin's claim, stating that there was an attempt by a Russian sabotage and reconnaissance group, or an SRG, to enter Ukrainian territory, but the SRG was eliminated. But also with this, and when you think about it, this Putin statement, quote, crossed the border between Ukraine and Russia and entered enemy territory. Well, just wow, what an update. Your 3-day SMO invasion into Ukraine, and now nearly completing the 3rd year with this being your update. You made it across a Ukrainian border, never mind that happened 3 years ago, and you still have a Ukrainian presence in Kursk. It's all a bit ridiculous. But that wasn't enough, because he also decided to add off the back of those statements that all along the battle line, Russian troops are advancing. Really? All along the 1,000-mile battle lines that Russian troops are said to be advancing, according to Putin? What a generic comment from the man himself. But let's take a look at some of that battle line, shall we? Where the armed forces of Ukraine advanced in Lysivka, in the Pokrovsk direction, expanding from their recently taken up position of Dechenska, then headed a little bit east, as also was the case yesterday, with the AFU pushing back the enemy at the connection to the main highway, but still to provide a fair balance to the situation. And though Russian gains include just east of this location, and I have to zoom back into that one because as you can see, just dying to reach that road in the northern direction. And with them even consolidating some area south at the Constantinople direction, what we're really looking at here is a mixed bag of outcomes from a few acute locations, which feels far from representative of, as Putin puts it, advancing all along the battle lines. Then to a brief further look at events on the map. So the AFU's 128th Mountain Assault Brigade repels a Russian assault. At least 3 BMD infantry fighting vehicles were utterly destroyed in this engagement. Then also footage of a Ukrainian anti-air team seen downing a Russian attack drone with a single burst of M2 Browning with its 50 caliber HMG fire last night. These Ukrainian anti-air teams usually operate somewhat spread out and mostly networked into the Ukrainian early warning system, receiving live radar data. Most use mounted M2 Brownings with onboard thermal sights, but some have even further enhanced targeting systems. Then headed across to Romania, where the country has enacted a new law permitting the downing of unauthorized Russian drones and missiles, even in peacetime. This move expands airspace control and allows NATO forces to assist in interceptions, reinforcing some collective defense commitments. It's a significant step in bolstering regional security. Russian drones have previously impacted on Romanian territory on multiple occasions in the past, and now, although Romania's new law doesn't explicitly grant permission to shoot down Russian drones inside of Ukrainian airspace, as it focuses on enhancing Romania's ability to intercept unauthorized aerial threats within its own airspace, the phrasing of the law and its implications does leave room for interpretation, particularly regarding how close Romania might act to its own border and whether it could indirectly affect drones operating just inside of Ukraine. Then headed back to a few quick news updates as Zelensky and the UK PM Starmer held talks, emphasising the UK's crucial role in bolstering European security. Zelensky expressed gratitude for the support from the British people, and in a significant statement, Starmer endorsed Ukraine's wartime suspension of elections, drawing a parallel to the UK's actions during World War II. Then in some more news, French President Macron has laid out his vision for a peace process involving Ukraine, emphasising its active participation and respect for its sovereignty. He insists on long-term peace with reliable guarantees, also considering Europe's broader security interests. Macron has positioned France as the key guarantor of this peace, asserting that supporting Ukraine is a fundamental interest of their nation. In other words, for these latest two news pieces, Europe looks to be gearing up, not slowing down, in their support for Ukraine. And then on these topics, Europe is considering deploying 30,000 peace troopers, aka peacekeepers, to Ukraine after the war, as per new reports. The plan includes stationing forces in key cities and ports, excluding the east, using drones and satellites for bordering safety and monitoring, patrolling the skies, and putting a restoration to flights. So if peace negotiations come through in whatever form they look like, it only happens in the event of security guarantees, not just for Ukraine, but the entirety of Europe, because they would be stopping the Russian aggression from occurring again. Deterrence is really the only long-term solution. Then to a super quick Russian military mobilization blunder segment. So Russian regiments, even elite Marines, continue to be replenished by Russians on crutches whom the Russian command sends to Ukraine for meat grinding straight from the hospitals. This is the world's second army. Now, the Russian soldier behind the camera narrates and seems even disgusted, saying how Russian Marines can look like this on crutches, and stating that Russian command doesn't even care who they send to the SMO. So that's it for today, guys. Been a busy day looking into all of those events. It still does remain to see how all of this plays out, though I am concerned, or should I say disappointed, that an outcome we might face or see is Ukraine amending their constitution only to get a candidate that Putin doesn't like, and then from that only to have Putin say, nope, this is illegitimate, we don't accept it. It would just be a waste of time. Having said that, Russia's days are numbered. So that's it for today, guys. Thanks again for watching. Please continue to like, comment, subscribe, and I do hope to see all of you guys there on the next one. Cheers!